Greetings. Welcome to A Cappella Singing for the Average Congregation. Today, as part of this, we'll be talking about some ways in which your congregation that may not be comfortable singing a cappella or may have never sung a cappella before can start utilizing this in worship. Just a little bit about me. My name is CJ Redden-Liotta. I am the minister of music at Vienna Baptist Church, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. When I'm not at VBC, I am the choir director at Falls Church High School in Falls Church, Virginia, Fairfax County, which is just to the west of Washington, D.C. I'm also currently, as I record this, about to defend my dissertation in choral conducting at George Mason University, where I did my master's degree as well, and I'm also a graduate of the University of North Texas. I'm a two-time Lovelace Scholar of the Hymn Society. I'm very proud of that. And recently, myself and 11 others were chosen to do a 2-year symposium with Alice Parker, Issei Barnwell, Marilyn Haskell at Virginia Theological Seminary called Raising the Song, which was a masterclass over 2 years in congregational song leading. As we gather together virtually, we can also gather together to join a conversation about the topics brought up here today with your suggestions, with your best practices, with your questions. During the conference, I'll be monitoring this Padlet pretty closely so that I can respond to any questions, comments, concerns that you have. So simply take a picture of the QR code with your phone, enter that padlet.com address into your browser, and you can join the conversation. I'll bring this screen up several times during the presentation so that if something comes to mind as we're going along, you'll be able to hit pause and ask those questions. So the first thing we need to discuss is, why do we sing a cappella? The Center for Congregational Song and the Hymn Society has put out a guide for A Cappella Sunday, which is a day that we have set aside as a society, and several other organizations have joined in over the years, as the first Sunday in Lent to focus on singing a cappella in some way. Some of us take that and we sing a cappella all through the whole service. We add one or two pieces, and it's a worldwide event now, the first Sunday of Lent. So why do we want to sing a cappella? Why do we want to bring this tradition into our churches when we don't normally sing in an a cappella format? I'm going to use each of their reasons and expound upon them a little bit. First, it connects us to the history of the church. Our church history, for the first few hundred years of the church, we did not have any instruments in the church. Much of the music that we sing accompanied in our churches was intended for a cappella singing. Many of the chorales that we sing, much of all of the chant that we sing, many of the early American hymns that we sing were all intended to be sung a cappella. They were not intended to be accompanied. So it connects us back to the history of where all of these tunes, chorales, and other pieces of music come from. It connects us to many Christian denominations, traditions, and regions of the world that continue to use a cappella music as their primary mode of music making in worship. Many denominations in the U.S. and especially around the world still do not use instruments in worship. If they use instruments in worship, it's very, very rare. It offers to God something that is for many of us a gift that is different from our usual music making. There are many of us who can probably say that our church choirs don't sing a cappella very often, much less our entire congregation. So this is something that we can offer to God that is a different experience. It encourages the congregation song by building up confidence in their own voices. Sometimes our instruments serve as a crutch instead of a support to our congregation. The congregation hears the loud instrument and they go, I don't need to sing out because that's filling the space with music. I'll just sing in my own little space. When you take away the instruments, it forces our congregation and encourages them to sing out with their own voice. It emphasizes the unique ability of instruments to enhance the congregation's song. It makes folks realize that the instrument is supporting the singing, not replacing the singing. It allows the instrumentalist to spend a Sunday listening carefully to the congregation to assess where their voice needs support. Many of us, when we sing in our spaces, we are so disconnected by space that it's difficult for us to hear our congregation. By taking a Sunday and going out into the congregation where we can sing with the congregation, we can hear, oh, we need more support on the lower parts. Oh, the melody needs a little bit more support on most of our songs. It gives you an idea of what strengths the congregation has and where they need additional help. And singing a cappella is fun. I can tell you, as a school choir director, almost all of my students' favorite pieces are the a cappella ones, not the accompanied ones. So again, I invite you to join the conversation on Padlet. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Several folks who have been doing well, I'm sure will also pop in and out, and we'll be able to give you best practices and suggestions as we go along. So one of the first things that we need to talk about as we look at singing a cappella with our average congregation is, if you're like my church, the first thing that you always hear when you suggest something new is, well, we can't do that because blank. So let's look at a few of those obstacles that we face. My congregation doesn't sing well. This is one that I hear from so many of my colleagues. And what I tell them is, your congregation sings better than you think they do. Again, in many of our congregations, we are so separated from the folks in the congregation. In my church, nobody sits in the first 5 or 6 rows, and then I'm another 12 feet from the front row of the congregation. So you've got a lot of space between me and the singers. So it's very difficult for me to hear what's going on. So when we took the instruments away those first couple times, it was amazing to me, being right up in the middle of the congregation, how well they actually sing. My congregation doesn't like new things. When you create an atmosphere in your church, and probably speaking to Hymn Society members, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. We introduce new things to our congregation all the time. They just don't realize that they're new sometimes. So we'll talk about a couple ways that we can bring this singing into our congregation other than just diving into the deep end, so that it doesn't feel new when we're doing an entire service a cappella. My pastor doesn't like new things. a lot of times it just takes a conversation with the pastor to create an understanding that it's not new. We're bringing in something different, something unique into our congregation. My choir doesn't even sing a cappella. Well, this gives you a great opportunity to encourage your choir to be singing in an a cappella format. I don't know how to lead my congregation in singing. And this is an honest answer from a lot of folks. A lot of us, I am lucky that I am a choir director. I am a trained choir director. I am a trained singer. I am out in front of my choir. I have an accompanist and a wonderful organist. And we're able to each support the choir and congregation in our own way. Many of us are in positions where we are organist, choir master, where we are sitting behind the organ trying to conduct with our left eyebrow and nod the congregation in that may or may not be looking. So we'll talk about some techniques that we can use to help lead our congregation in singing. Again, as we go through the presentation, I invite you to join the conversation on Padlet, and we'll be able to have some of these questions answered as we go through the presentation. So let's talk about some techniques that we can use. And the first technique that we want to think about is starting small. When we started doing A Cappella Sunday, we did not jump all in. That was the very first time that we had ever sung a cappella in our space with our congregation. We started small. The year before, we had taken on a Lenten call to worship. We don't want to jump in with both feet. All right. Teaching is a process and learning is a process. Techniques such as lining out the song assist the congregation that doesn't read music. So when we talk about lining out, we're talking about using pitch levels with our hands. We're not using Kerwin signs or something like that our congregation's not going to understand. But they understand when my hand is up, it's a high note, and when my hand is down, it's a low note. So again, we started with a small piece, and you'll see me doing the lining out technique through here. We started with a very small single line paperless song. Something that all they needed to know was the words. What we need is here. 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 What we need, what we need is here. What we need is here. So once you've started with something very simple that your congregation can catch on pretty quickly, then you can get more complex. All it takes your congregation is one time going through a piece like that for them to realize, hey, we can do this. So something very simple like what we need is here. There are several from all kinds of cultures all around the world that you can use, but something very simple, and then getting into some more complex things. Simple canons are a great way to get into more complex things, especially if it's a canon that your congregation is familiar with. For us, one of the ones that we were able to use and I was able to introduce pretty easily in an a cappella format was Natalie Sleeth's Go Now in Peace. This is one of the heart songs of our congregation. Our preschool sings it every day at the end of chapel. Our kids learn it in Sunday school. Our kids sing it in front of the congregation. The congregation knows this song inside out. But when it's accompanied, people don't, we think about, oh, well, we'll sing it at the end of service. We'll sing it a couple times and then we'll just go. In an a cappella setting, it's very easy to get the congregation with a simple canon to actually sing it in canon.
Peace, go now in peace. May the love of God surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the love of God surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace, go now in peace, go now in peace. Everywhere, everywhere you may go, you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the love of God surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
So you can see, as a song leader, I had to think quickly on my feet as one side of the congregation decided to speed up just a little bit. And those are the sorts of things that we have to think about in our congregation and just be reactive to what's going on in front of you as a song leader. The screencasting software is creating a little bit of a lag between video and audio. So indeed, when I lead, I do not, I don't conduct in the European fashion where I'm, a quarter of a second in front of the whoever's singing or performing. I was with "Go now in peace, go now in peace." I was with the congregation with the lining out. Again, questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, let's join the conversation on the Padlet, and we'll have folks there talking with you. So now let's talk about being a great song leader, or the section I like to call "It's Okay Not to Be Perfect." There are many times in song leading where you just have to stop and go, okay, let's try this again. It's okay to not be perfect. And I'll use an example from what you just heard here in a moment. Things we need to remember. You must give your congregation permission to join you in singing. You must give your congregation permission. They need to know what they are expected to do. Otherwise, they will assume that you are just standing in the middle of the church singing by yourself. So when I lead an a cappella piece, I ask them to rise as they are able and join in singing. And if it's a piece that's appropriate, I will ask them, you may sing with me, you may create a harmony, you may sing whatever part is in your heart on that day. So you might have heard a little bit of harmony on What You Need Is Here, but so that was recorded the first Sunday in Lent. By the time we get to Palm Sunday and we're singing What We Need Is Here, we actually have a good smattering of harmony flowing through the congregation because they've become comfortable with it and singing. You must give yourself permission for the singing to take the lead. Many of us trained as soloists and choir members. We don't train as congregational singers and song leaders. So you have to give yourself permission for the singing to take the lead. Again, it's okay not to be perfect. You notice when in the Go Now in Peace, that's a great example of the singing started to take the lead. So I had to bounce from one part to another. You have to let it go where it's going to go. The congregation will sing as strongly as they are led. If you get up in front of the congregation and you go, I'll turn my camera back on so you can, if you stand in front of the congregation and you simply walk up to the congregation and you go now in peace, your congregation will not follow. Your congregation needs you to be in front of the congregation. They need you to be heard. I use a headset microphone when I lead singing, so that I can be not up in the chancel, which you could see far in our space, how far the lectern and organ is from the congregation. So I use a headset microphone. I bought that from Body Mics. If you think that these are expensive, they're not. I bought mine from bodymics.com for $99. That hooks right into the wireless system that we already have. Actually, all of us on Chancel now have moved to headset mics because that creates a very consistent sound. You want to be in the room, but not fill the room. We do not have a lot of microphones in the space to record the congregation singing, which is why you didn't hear the congregation as well from our live stream videos. But in the space, we set the singer, whoever's leading singing, to just so that you can be heard in the congregation, but not overpower the congregation. Pitch is relative. My favorite, the very first time I saw John Bell lead worship was at a Hymn Society conference, and this quote has stuck with me ever since. I don't have perfect pitch, I have appropriate pitch. You'll notice that if you rewind and listen to the Go Now in Peace, I started it at a tenor pitch that I always start that song at. And the congregation did not feel that song at the pitch I gave them. And so it sunk just a little bit and then we settled in. We didn't continue to sing. And some of you who are choir directors know that this happens in a cappella choral music too. Sometimes the pitch of the room, the acoustics, everything around just sometimes doesn't sit well, and you just need a little bit lower and it just settles just that tiny bit and stays there. I have been in singings with Issei Barnwell where she will go and she'll teach a whole piece and we'll start singing and she's like, nope, stop. Here's a new pitch. Let's go. Because the congregation in front of her just does not want to be at whatever pitch, high, low. If you are a high soprano or a low bass, you have to be careful when you start, or a high tenor, low alto, you have to be careful that you start the singing in a nice, comfortable spot that's going to be for everybody. Don't be afraid to use a pitch pipe or something like that to give you your pitch before you start, so that you don't start too high or too low. I didn't give a fresh pitch on that song because we had just finished another song right before the pastor's benediction. And actually this year, there is a app for my Apple Watch, which I used for pitch. I didn't even need to blow a pitch pipe. I just touched the pitch on my watch. So, use technology to your advantage if you need to. Your choir is best utilized as a unit. I used to think that having my choir spread out among the congregation was the best idea ever to help strengthen their singing. Until this year's A Cappella Sunday, when I did just that. The choir was not singing an anthem because it was a communion Sunday for us. We did a little bit different. Normally we would sing an anthem. Instead, for the offertory, we sang choruses as people brought up their offerings. And so I decided that maybe the choir singing in the congregation would be great. It was not, because the congregation wants, again, the congregation will sing as strong as they are led. Your choir being in front of the congregation, or as a unit somewhere in the congregation, so that they can sing really strong together, will help lead your congregation a cappella. I'll show you. This is the difference between A Cappella Sunday 2018, where the choir was as a unit forward in the congregation, and A Cappella Sunday this year, where the choir was in the congregation. Here's the choir forward.
When we are tested and wrestle alone, famished for bread when the world offers stone, nourish us, God, by your word and your way, food that sustains us by night and by day.
So you can see the choir is over here. The choir is over here on the left. I'm here right on top of the congregation. Normally the choir would be back here, really far away from the congregation. So here's the same tune that was Ruth Duck's When We Are Tested text. This is the Be Thou My Vision text, this year's A Cappella Sunday, with the choir in the congregation.
As you're able, as we join in our hymn of worship, for those of you who aren't real big singers, you can help fill an important part by singing one note. Hum, 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 hum. When we are tested and wrestle alone, famished for bread when the world offers stone, nourish us, God, by your word and your way, food that sustains us by night and by day.
So I'm sorry, that was the same text. So you can hear instantly how much less confident the congregation was in the second video. The timing wasn't there. I did give the same instruction for the congregation to sing the drone pitch if they wanted to in both. You could hear the pitch slid very quickly. The tempo was not together. It just started lagging all of a sudden because the strength of leadership wasn't in the front. When we are singing hymns like this, a simple piece, a simple one-line paperless piece is very easy to lead with one song leader. But if you have a choir or a small ensemble that can help you lead the larger pieces, hymns, especially when you're singing hymns in parts, it is a much more successful event. Your congregation will only be as good as you think they will be. It brings to mind the old quote that's sometimes attributed to Henry Ford: "Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right." So you have to have the conviction that your congregation is going to succeed at this. If you go into the congregation that morning going, "This is going to be a disaster," it's going to be a disaster. Because you, as the leader, have to have the confidence for your congregation to be successful. This is a time to showcase diversity in music. This is not a time to save diversity in music for. A cappella singing is a great time to present music from other cultures in the way that they are sung in other cultures. When we do songs from Central Africa, especially now, I do not have them accompanied. I sing them a cappella with my congregation. I will teach some parts to the choir because that is the authentic way that they are performed. I'll bring in some drums. Bringing in percussion is not breaking the rules for singing a cappella. So for when it's appropriate for that kind of music. This is not a time to save diversity in music for. We should not be relegating music from other cultures to when we have an A Cappella Sunday, or to World Communion Sunday, or to Pentecost Sunday, to those Sundays that we celebrate diversity in the church. We should be using this music throughout the year. When we use this music throughout the year, then when we want to do an entire service a cappella, our congregation is more comfortable with the music because they have been singing this music throughout the church year, not just on a special occasion. So I've brought up a lot of different points at this point. So I hope that if you have questions, if you have other comments, if there are things that have worked in your congregation, things that have not worked in your congregation, please share them on the Padlet. I'd love to have this conversation with you. So where can you find music and resources? That's often the hardest thing to do. So many of us are limited. So many of us feel limited by the book in our pew. And so let me show you just a few of these resources. The Center for Congregational Song and their A Cappella Sunday resource guides are a great resource. What they do is I didn't screenshot it, but I actually retyped it in for you. So it's easier to see in the screencast. So this is one, I was one of the authors who helped write the A Cappella Sunday resource guides. There is one for each of the liturgical years. So all 3 years in the cycle are covered. This happens to be for the hymn text and hymn tune Eventide for Abide With Me. It gives you the lectionary text connection, a hymnary link, and how to use it in a liturgy, both for a Catholic Mass or a basic fourfold Protestant service. And the way this guide works is a lot of times we don't know how to start or finish when we sing hymns a cappella. So this gives you a way to start the hymn, finish the hymn, variations for stanzas, so that it doesn't become this very static moment. So for this one, for example, I suggested that the cantor just starts, "Abide with me, fast falls the eventide," and then invites everyone to join in measure 5. That saves the whole pitch giving process too. You can give yourself as the leader one pitch, and then the choir can find the harmony pitches instead of having to do ba 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 bum and give everybody their pitches. Some variations. These little hymn tags are great ways to finish the hymn. So, like for this one, I suggested that a choir or quartet sings the last 4 measures of the final stanza, but they pick up as the congregation hits the last ba bum bum. As they hit that first note, the choir or the quartet picks up those last 4 measures again. So it doesn't just sound like you've stopped singing. A lot of times we can imitate what we do in an instrumental format in the a cappella concept. Music That Makes Community is an amazing resource for a cappella and paperless songs. Musicthatmakescommunity.org is their website. And at this conference, if you check out the listing of sectionals, Paul Vasile and Martha Burford have done one of these sectionals just on Music That Makes Community and the ways that they work to bring singing into our communities. Go online and watch master song leaders do their work. I had the privilege of working one-on-one with these 4 who are all members of the society: Issei Barnwell, Alice Parker, Paul Vasile, Marilyn Haskell. These folks are just amazing at what they do. Debbie Lou Ludolph is another from the society. Martha Burford, who's doing this sectional. You've got all of these wonderful resources in our society that all have places you can go on YouTube, on their websites, and watch them leading song. You can do this virtually too. In this world of virtual worship, you can worship a cappella. How do we do this? So what we did for Pentecost Sunday is we decided that we indeed we were going to do an entire world music Sunday for Pentecost this year. That was our original plan, so that we were doing an entire Sunday focused on music from other cultures that was not World Communion Sunday. We do use music from other cultures all the time throughout the year. I use a lot in Advent, especially in Lent and around Easter. So we decided we wanted to bring this idea into our virtual worship service. And so what we did was I had my choral scholars. I am lucky enough to have a set of 4 choral scholars that are paid musicians in my choir. You could do this with 4 members of your choir or your choir as well. They each recorded their part to this song, and we presented it a cappella, not instrumentally accompanied, and I filmed myself on screen leading the song the exact way that I would if it was in worship. So here is Hakun. So this also gives you a good example of some things that I do as a song leader. You can see the lining out process. You can see all of those sorts of things. So here is Hakuno Akaita Sa Jesu, a Central African piece that begins in Shona. And here is that example. Our song of worship and praise today comes from Central Africa. This version comes from Zimbabwe, and the first verse is sung in Shona, one of the traditional languages of Zimbabwe. These Central African languages often equate in the same word, singing and dancing. So I hope that in your homes that you will get up and give yourself some space and feel free to move as we join in singing our song of praise today. You'll hear in the middle that we've got a spot where you'll be able to run and to turn and to search. So I hope that you, in the spirit of Pentecost, join in moving and singing our song of worship today. Hakuna wa kaita sa Jesu, Hakuna wa kaita sa Ye, Hakuna wa kaita sa Jesu, Haku Jina. There's no one in this world like Jesus. There's no one in this world like Him. There's no one in this world like Jesus. There's no one like Him. There's no one in this world like Jesus. There's no one in this world like Him. There's no one in this world like Jesus. There's no one like Him. I'm running, searching. I'm turning, searching. I'm searching everywhere. There's no one like Him. There's no one in this world like Jesus. There's no one in this world like Him. There's no one in this world like Jesus. There's no one like Him. I'm running, searching. I'm turning, searching. I'm searching everywhere. There's no one like Him. There's no one in this world. There's no one in this world like Jesus. There's no one in this world like Him. There's no one in this world like Jesus. There's no one like Him. No one in this world. There's no one in this world like Him. No one in this world. There's no one in this world like Him. There's no one in this world like Jesus. There's no one like Him. 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 Our song of worship and praise today. So you can see that even in a virtual setting, you're able to lead this a cappella way. The technology for that was simply me using my iPhone camera in my dining room. And then each of the choral scholars used their phones and a voice memo app to record their part. And I layered them in video editing software. If you know the video editing software or have somebody who does, it's not difficult to do this sort of thing. If you don't know the editing software, it's a bit of a steep learning curve, but it is possible to do this sort of song. And then I simply, the same way with a voice recorder app, recorded the shaker and the djembe track. So it's possible to do these sorts of things even in a virtual setting. Encouraging your congregation to sing along with you. You notice I gave permission not only to sing, but to get up and move. And those are the sorts of things that many of our congregations need. They especially need permission when you're asking them to move or do something. They need to know it's okay to get out of their little bubble that they usually exist in church and do something different. So again, I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about some of the best practices that I've used as we've been doing A Cappella Sunday at Vienna Baptist Church for the past few years, as well as incorporating a lot of these song leading techniques into our everyday worship. If you have questions, I hope that you'll join the Padlet. that you'll create some of these conversations. If you have questions, you can always email me, cj@viennabc.org. And I look forward to the next time that we see one another, that hopefully I'll also hear some of these stories of how you've been able to take these techniques, these ideas, and bring them into your own congregation. Thank you so much for joining me for this time of exploration and thought. I look forward again to when you can all join us next year here in my backyard in the Washington, D.C. area, when we can join together in singing and sharing our ideas and sharing with one another. Thank you for joining me again, and have a great day.